All right, we are going to bring to you another live stream from my channel, TrueCrime, and we're going to continue to talk about the Idaho 4 murders. But before we get into that, there's a couple of things that I want to go over. One, if you're visiting the channel for the first time, if you're live right now, definitely leave some stuff in the chat, and we'll go over some of the stuff that is coming up in chat. Two, check out my channel. I do a lot of vanished videos / missing folks that are still missing today. The last few have been recovered, but we definitely want to get that information out to everybody, and it's something a little bit different that I don't see very often on YouTube, so check out some of those videos. We definitely want to continue to build up our community, and we'll continue to do some of the live stuff with current events, because that seems to be a little bit more popular, and something I'm pretty passionate about as well. So that being said, we're going to jump into it. What we're going to do today, it'll be just kind of a continuation on from our last live stream where we really kind of broke down what was going on with the Idaho 4 and what we thought about some of the characters that came up. So i.e. the vape shop guy who gave an interview about the conversation that he had had with Kaylee and Maddie at some point. Although, just to recap a little bit, didn't say a whole lot about talking directly to Kaylee, but there was a lot of insinuations and a lot of more or lesses, things like that Kaylee's friends were either saying and or motioning to Kaylee when it came to the stalker information. The other piece that I wanted to hit from an interview perspective that we hit last time was the neighbor. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute, just because it seems like there's some things that are getting a little bit more weird with the neighbor. I don't know if the neighbor's involved by any means, but I don't know. It's definitely seems like some clout chasing maybe, or just some things going on with that neighbor that are just unexplained at this point. Could be a pretty traumatic experience. So we'll talk about that in a moment as well. And then I went and found a really good timeline. I think it was on Fox News. So we'll utilize that, and I'll go through the timeline. I'll put it up on the screen so you can see the timeline of information released and really what that's done to the case, so we can recap it a little bit. And then we're going to finish it off with just looking at the newest video. What are my thoughts on the video? I'd like to get your thoughts on the video, see if there any significance of what we see in that video with Kaylee and Maddie walking by talking about Adam, and kind of who is Adam as well, and what ties does Adam have, and does this have any significance on the case whatsoever? And then I'll just hit a couple of updates along the way. So first and foremost, let's just jump into looking at my screen here. I kind of wanted to hit on this screen, and I did this last time, but I kind of want to hit it first this time. Here's some of the resources that I'm using on YouTube that I check in almost daily. I think that a few of these, they do a pretty great job of reporting, whether it's the Delphi murders, whether it's Shanquilla Robinson, whether it is the Idaho 4, whatever that might be. There's a lot of good folks on YouTube that I just want to kind of highlight right now. So News Nation, I watch them quite frequently. Law and Crime typically gets like really down and dirty in the details, which I really like. True Crime Daily, obviously that's a pretty obvious one for most folks, but a lot of good stories on there as well. And then there's a few more like 10 to Life. Love watching 10 to Life. There's just some good stories that are on there. A little bit more vlog style, a little bit more podcast style. And, if you got 30 to 45 minutes, I highly recommend checking in on that. But, here's some of the folks from a real crime perspective. I will say there's a new one that I just started seeing. Let me see if I can find it here. Oh, Crime Circus. This one to me was kind of interesting. And I would definitely say with Crime Circus, there's a lot of points in there that I haven't seen on other channels. So if you get a chance or an opportunity, we'd actually highlighted one of the videos from Crime Circus on our last live stream. Check them out. I think that there's definitely some things in there that are going on that, I didn't notice before. Specifically in my live stream, we're going to talk about Adam a little bit, and I didn't realize that Adam possibly could have been a roommate to Jack, which was Kaylee's boyfriend. Or ex-boyfriend, sorry. Let me clarify that, ex-boyfriend. And then we've also heard that Adam is a bartender at the Corner Club as well. So some interesting stuff. I would highly recommend checking out that channel because you're going to see some cool stuff on there, and then some facts that I haven't seen in some other channels. So that being said, let's jump right into it. The most recent thing that I've gotten, this was on Twitter, and this came from Brian Enton. Latest from Eugene, Oregon police regarding the Hyundai located. So at 5:19 a.m. on December 17th, the person was reported sleeping inside a vehicle. It was a Hyundai Elantra. Officers responded to the call at West 7th Place and Seneca Road, and contact was made. There was no further report. We have no information to indicate that the vehicle is related to the Moscow, Idaho case. However, they were sent the vehicle information, so they have it to review. If you have further questions, please contact the Moscow police. So that was something that came out. We don't think that that has any ties to this case. However, anytime a Hyundai Elantra gets pulled over or something like this where cops are called at 7 a.m. and somebody's sleeping in it, transient possibly, obviously this is going to kind of break news, and you never know, right? Every clue is a good clue. So just something that I just recently read that wanted to make sure that we got out of there. The other thing that I saw is that the police came out and said that there's been 10,000 tips so far. So we do know that a lot of folks have been talking about the case going cold. Specifically, the parents have been saying that they're worried that the case is going to go cold. At this point, there's so many tips to go through for authorities and police that they've probably got months left to go through a lot of these tips. Keep in mind, there's probably a lot that have no relevance, but every tip is a good tip, in my opinion, whether it's positive or negative. When the tips stop coming in, that's when the case starts going cold. So we want those tips to continue to come in and then let the authorities kind of work through those. So last count was about 10,000 tips over the last month, which I don't want to say it's a good thing because really nothing in this case is a good thing. But having tips continually coming in is a positive thing, and it could possibly push the case forward. Now, is it a lot for this police department to handle? I would say it is, and based off of my last live stream, I think that there's definitely been some communication gaps with this police department, with anybody else that's assisting them, and it's really leading to a lot of speculation and a lot of rumors, right? So there's that. Now let me jump into, and we'll come over here. We're going to look at the timeline before we look at the video. So I kind of queued it up a little bit. If we go down, Saturday, November 12th, right? The final Instagram post. In one of the photos, Mogan sits on Goncalves' shoulders. I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but that's okay. And basically, you're going to see this in Instagram, right? That night, they hung out at the Corner Club, a downtown bar at 202 North Main. We're very familiar with that. November 13th, so this would have been early in the morning. This is where the video comes up. We watched some of this last time on the live stream, but basically they're at the Grub Bus, and this is where you see Hoodie Guy, right? And essentially you see Joey as well, which we saw that video last time. You know, he basically comes on, he says that he didn't see anything that was out of the ordinary here other than the girls being very drunk. And I think it was specifically to Kaylee that he was saying was very inebriated, but he said it was pretty standard for that at the Grub Bus, and that's why they have a Twitch camera set up. So nothing new there. Murders happen. You know, police figure that it happened between 3 and 4 a.m. And then obviously it was a knife that did it. Now, we have heard some updates since then around how that works. So we'll get to that in just a moment. Essentially, the next day, the surviving roommates go through and call the police. Originally, they thought that somebody was just passed out and were asking for help, and we're kind of unclear at who came over and helped. I'm sure there will be some clarity around that, but essentially, they call the police. The police rule them out pretty quick, or at least they say that they're not persons of interest or suspects at this point, because is anybody really ruled out? I don't think so. They do use the terminology cleared a lot, but they could always go revisit some of these folks based off of the evidence. Not saying that their roommates did anything, just making that point because a lot of folks are frustrated that so many people got cleared, quote unquote. Okay, Monday, November 14th, there's conflicting accounts. This one was very frustrating. So obviously the mayor said that it was a crime of passion and that it was isolated and that there was no risk to the community. On the 15th, the police come out and essentially say that it was an isolated, targeted attack and there's no imminent threat to the community. However, they do not release more information than that, and they come back out later and say that it may not have been a targeted attack towards a specific individual, but targeted toward the house. Now, some of this is going to really put some panic in and let that set in a little bit, because is there a danger to the community? Let me stop there for a second. Yes, 100% there is danger to the community to this day, because we don't know who did it, right? We may know some of the details, and obviously the authorities know more details than us. I've stated this before. There's 113 pieces of evidence that the authorities have that we don't, and there's information that the authorities have that we don't, and there's very good reason for them to know a lot more information than we do, obviously, when it comes to prosecuting this case, when they do find a suspect. And I should say, if they find a suspect. Now, in most high-profile cases like this, they will find a suspect, but there is a percentage and a chance and plausibility that they never do find somebody. At this point, I would think that they have some folks in mind, but obviously nobody's been named a person of interest. So that, to me, is a very interesting fact, right? So let's continue to move on. New details emerge at a press conference. Moscow police chief revealed to reporters for the first time that there were 2 female roommates at home during the horrific attack, right? Okay, so we already hit that. I got a little bit ahead of myself. I should have read through a little bit better. Coroner releases autopsy finding. The student causes and manner of death were officially ruled homicide by stabbing in a press release. And I think this is where... maybe not quite. Yeah, this is where. So she said the victims were likely ambushed in their sleep with a large knife and each had multiple stab wounds. This is a big one right here, that some of the victims had defensive wounds. Now, later on, I think just a couple of days ago, they said that 2 folks had the defensive wounds, but pretty important fact that we really want to hit here. Police share aerial map on the 18th of where everything kind of went down. And does this really help the public? I don't think it does, but maybe for some of the locals that live there or some of the students that this may help out. I don't know. It's just information, I think, being released at that time. If I had to guess, the authorities were kind of trying to, buy themselves a little bit more time and or try to alert the neighborhood if they saw anything suspicious that night. Okay. Police dismissed potential connection between Skin Dog and murders. So I didn't even hear about this until I actually read it a little while ago. But essentially, they're saying that nothing had happened. This Australian Shepherd was found skinned and filleted 3 weeks before the killings, but it isn't related to the homicide. I think that is a good point, though, that somebody pointed that out, because maybe it would have had something to do with it. But obviously, in this case, we think that it didn't. And then the stalker claims come out on the 22nd. We've talked a lot about the stalker claims. So is it possible that Kaylee had a stalker? Yes, I think it's definitely possible that Kaylee had a stalker. I think that, the plausibility for somebody that is, essentially going to college that young, yeah, for sure. Alexander, what's going on? How are you doing? I just noticed you in chat. Sorry. But is there a possibility that Kaylee had a stalker? Absolutely. I think that where we get caught up just a little bit is around the information that we've got, especially from the vape guy around stalkers, because Kaylee doesn't actually come out and say it herself. And then also the family said that they didn't hear anything of a stalker. Doesn't mean she didn't have one. Just means that we don't know the details of that stalker and or how many stalkers there were, or how many stalkers she might have thought that were in her life. And on some of the videos that you see, you do kind of see her room. Would it have been easy to look into from, say, where the tree line was? Yeah, it could have been. Does this play a factor? It might play a factor. And going back to my previous videos, this is where I think they got to look into Jack a little bit more. Not saying that Jack had anything to do with it, but being an ex-boyfriend and having other boys that may have come around, could play a factor, something to think about. This one was really good. This one I thought was a really good lead here. Would have been the nearby stabbings unrelated to Moscow quadruple homicide. So, this was huge because 2021 double stabbings in Salem, Oregon do not appear to be connected to the King Road murders, police said. You always kind of want to tie and look at things that might be similar just because, it could be a serial killer, right? And that's not something that we're hearing a lot in the news, but it is something that you kind of want to see. And we're going to see that in a little bit here with the stabbing that came up, I think it was a week ago, that ends up being unrelated, but it is something that we always want to look at as well. This one was really frustrating to the family if you're looking at my screen here. So a lot of people were cleared as suspects. Now, I do want to say that just because you're cleared as a suspect doesn't really mean a whole lot. It just means that the authorities are probably not focused on you. Now, in some cases, what they might do is they might clear you to see, how do you react to this? Do you leave the area or do you do anything suspicious? Now, in this case, I think that they wouldn't do that because at the end of the day, if they did go ahead and do something like that and then it ended up being that it was a serial killer on the loose and they were aware of it, could that be blowback onto the authorities, which it would be? Would that ultimately make people feel unsafe in the future? It would. And if you've seen any of my posts in some of these news articles, you'll see a lot of people come to the defense of the small town right away. Sorry, that's the dogs in the background. But they'll come to the defense and say, hey, it was a pretty tight-knit community. And in that case, that it's a pretty safe community. Now, I would argue that fact, especially coming from a small town. Anytime something like this happens, until they find a suspect, and a suspect either comes forward and says, hey, I did commit these crimes via confession, or that we can prove without a reasonable doubt that that was the proper suspect, I think that there is a little bit of a danger in the community for that. Small town or big town, you got to take that into consideration, right? But it is nice to see that there's a lot of people that come to the defense of a small town because, up until these murders, was that town pretty safe? I would say it probably was. Now, is this a crime of passion? It probably was based off of the information that we have right now. But I'm no expert. I haven't seen the 113 pieces of evidence that the police have. I'm just going based off of the evidence that I have and that you folks have so far today. So let's continue on. Okay. We've seen this victim's father concerned about police missteps. I think we're all kind of concerned, especially around the communication. I couldn't say for sure that the police have done their missteps. Like I said in my previous video, if you see what they've been doing, some of the things have been right. Like when they use the nucleus of the house where the murders have happened, they continue to expand their radius on looking for surveillance videos. People have asked, why did it take so long to get to the liquor store? Well, the liquor store was, a mile and a half away. You can tell that the circle is getting bigger based off of the information that they're looking for, which means that as the radius around the nucleus is getting bigger, that means a lot more resources have to go into it. And they also got to run into getting there in a timely fashion so they're not losing video. Thus, finding that we saw the white car going past the person that ended up, and we're going to see that in a little bit here, but ended up getting it on surveillance, right? Whether or not that Hyundai Elantra has anything to do with the crime, we don't know, but the police suspect that they might have some information. So let's continue on. And here it is, right? So police ask for information about vehicles seen near crime scene. So we don't know a lot about this. What does that mean? Was it in the driveway of the house? Was it a couple houses down? Was it at the fraternity house? There's a lot of information that they're looking for here, but they want to talk to the people in this car. So that is pretty significant, I would say. Here we go. Parents again kind of described the daughter injuries. I think at that time we also had heard that I can't remember what the exact terminology was, but it was basically like Kaylee had more brutal wounds than any of the other roommates. Is that true? Could be true. Who knows? Would that indicate a crime of passion? It could. It really could. And that would also kind of lead me to believe, have we asked all the questions of her ex-boyfriend? And not saying that he was the one that did it, but it would kind of bring back that stalker thing forward. Again, though, that's all speculation. That's all hearsay. Even when the vape shop owner was talking about it, he specifically says in the video that he didn't hear that specifically from Kaylee, which then in turn tells me that nobody's heard this directly from Kaylee. So what does that mean? Not saying that she didn't have a stalker, but again, got to kind of figure it out with the facts, right? Like, she's got to say something. Here's that station or that surveillance I was talking about. So footage from gas station. So this wasn't the liquor store, so I got that a little bit mixed up. But again, they're still looking for this white car. Now, is that a Hyundai Elantra? I can't tell in that picture. Very possibly could be. It does have the outline of one. It is white. Does this have something to do with it? It possibly could. I definitely would like to know who is in that car and what they know, because it could lead to at least a person of interest. And that's what we're looking for here, folks. Okay. New video shows 2 victims with man before murders. We're going to look at that here in just a moment. I think that obviously the police and authorities have been sitting on this video for a little while, and I think very much like the Delphi murders, they're trying to release information as needed, because they want to hold on to as much information to try to prosecute once they have a person of interest / turns into a suspect / turns into an arrest affidavit, and then obviously you go on from there. Let's watch the video and I'll kind of get your take. So folks that are in the chat, what's your take on this video so far? So let's watch it and we'll kind of ask that question.
ABC News obtaining the surveillance footage. Kaylee Gonzalez's father says
hopefully you can hear that. I know I should have had my headset on like last time, but
Idaho with a man whom police have confirmed is not a suspect. Their conversation caught on camera. The footage submitted.
Okay, so it's interesting because basically, we hear that, what did you tell Adam? And then I think it was Kaylee that said, I told Adam everything, right? So the obvious question here, and you've probably seen this on the news, you've seen it everywhere that you've been, is who's Adam? And going back to what I was saying previously, if you kind of break it down a little bit, Jack had a roommate that's name was Adam and didn't live very far away, right? 20 or 30 seconds. Again, not saying Adam did anything. And then Adam ended up being the bartender at the corner club as well. Now, does this video really mean anything in the grand scheme of things? I don't know. If you break down the video a little bit, there doesn't sound like there's any anger. And if you kind of look at what's happening here, I'm going to turn the sound off. If you kind of look the way that they're walking, it just kind of seems like they're walking and talking and just kind of bouncy and having a little bit of fun. Obviously, you see what I would say is probably hoodie guy there, the other Jack, who ends up at the food truck with them as well. So that would tell me that obviously they knew hooded guy. And this video probably would have been good a week ago when people were essentially trying to dox the guy. And, and police sat on this video. So that would kind of give me some questions there too. Like, they could have really helped this guy out a little bit. Not that this kind of exonerates him, but obviously they knew him, where at one point everybody thought that this guy was just being creepy and standing behind him. But obviously he walks up to the food truck with them, right? So does this video really help out? I don't know if it does. And I don't know if it really tells us anything other than they were having a conversation and that at some point Kaylee told Adam everything. Now, what could everything be? Just use your imagination. We automatically go to the murders and what could have led to these murders because that's what we're looking for. But in this case, maybe she told Adam everything that needed to be in a drink that she got at the bar. Maybe she told him everything on a test that he was going to take later on in the week. Who knows, right? There's a million conversations that could have happened, because at the end of the day, did Maddie and Kaylee know that they were going to be running into trouble when they got home? Obviously not, right? So why would they be having a conversation with something negative going on, especially if they were having fun? And that would lead me to believe that they weren't worried about anything, because when they get to the food truck, they're having a lot of fun with the food truck people, trying to take food, trying to jump into the food truck, and really just having fun is what it looked like to me. You know, a couple of drunk folks in college just doing drunk things, right? Didn't look like they had any kind of anger or any kind of worries when they were even having that conversation and walking by. So does this video really tell us anything? At this point, without any evidence to support it, either on the front end or to the back end, I would say this video really doesn't do a whole lot. Would we want the authorities to identify who Adam is and talk to Adam? Absolutely. And I think that goes back to the ex-boyfriend, Jack, who can help them out with Adam. Now, the authorities may have done this already because they've been sitting on this video for a while. But to me, it really hasn't made or broken the case whatsoever. I think we're going to need a really big piece of evidence to come out, like a witness and or something that comes forward from maybe DNA, or somebody makes a big mistake, so that way we can get some persons of interest. But some of the information that's come out so far really hasn't done much to further the case, other than a lot more speculation. Okay, so couple more things I'm going to leave you with before I end this stream. So anybody that's in here right now, if you've got any questions or you would like my opinion on something, or if you have an opinion, I would really like to hear it, because doing the true crime stuff, I love hearing other people's opinions, because it gets me thinking and it gets me to think differently about my approach when I'm looking at some of this stuff. And I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts. For my job, I work retail. I'm on the road a lot. And that's just something that I do. So obviously I'm very passionate about it, but I do like to hear other people's perspective, because it might be stuff that I miss. And I think together there's always something that, you know, you can kind of see from a different perspective, to be like, wow, didn't think about that. And that is a very real possibility, right? So for me, it's the neighbor. Do I think the neighbor did it? I don't know. I don't want to have any speculation or accuse anybody, because that's not what I do. But the neighbor's acting very weird, and I don't know if it is clout that he's chasing, but clearly, you know, he started up a new YouTube channel, and just has some, I don't want to say weird, but just things that just don't seem to fit very well. And it all kind of started happening after this. And I'm not saying that he's done anything or he said anything to lead me to believe that he's the murderer by any means. Just might be some clout chasing that's going on, but it's definitely something that I would say that the authorities probably need to investigate again. And I know he's been quote unquote cleared as well. Again, it's not something that I would say that he's involved, but probably need to ask a few more questions. Now, I do want to highlight before I end this is that it could be a very traumatic experience for that neighbor as well, because if you think about it, somebody was murdered right next door to your house and it was done while they were sleeping. You know, that would be pretty traumatic, right? And if you had nothing to do with it, if that happened to my neighbors here, you know, I'd be pretty nervous. Right? It'd be something that I probably wouldn't sleep for a long period of time. And I would start thinking, like, what if my house was chosen rather than their house, right? And I know that the police are trying to do their best in saying, hey, the community's safe. But for me, until they caught somebody, I wouldn't think that I was safe. So again, it could have been a traumatic experience for the neighbor, and that might be why he's acting the way that he's acting. But just some things around the way that he's acting just seems, again, just unfavorable to me, and seems like more questions need to be asked. Again, might be just the senses going off, and I'm not accusing him of anything, because at this point I can legitimately say I don't have a suspect in mind either. I just think that there's people that need to be questioned a little bit more, right? Neighbor being one of them, I think needs to have a few more questions. I think the ex-boyfriend Jack needs to have a few more questions, right? Especially if they think it's a crime of passion. It's something that probably he needs to be under scrutiny, even if the family says that they trust him 1,000, 2,000, 3,000%, which was, I think, a direct quote. it still has to have the questions out there to kind of ask, like, what's going on, crime of passion, and then was he aware of any kind of stalker behavior? Because, he might have been, or he might not have been, and these are questions that might have already been asked. And then the last person I think they need to question a little bit more is the vape guy, and by no means do I think vape guy has anything to do with this. I just think that they need to pull him in, put him in a room, and give him some time to think through the conversations that he had with the girls when they came in as a group, and maybe even do it with like a psychiatrist that can kind of get him to slow down and think through his version of the events, because that could be very helpful in the future. Again, I don't think he did anything, but I just think that it's just a little bit weird. Okay. So Alexander, you say, seems strange, such rage, but careful enough to not be obvious. Yeah, that's a good point. That really is. And to your point, obviously like four people died here, and one had brutally more visible wounds than the other three. I don't know what that means, but that would tell me that probably there's more stabbings, or maybe the gouges are deeper, or whatever the case is. I've never been a killer, so I've never been in the mind of a killer, but that would tell me probably crime of passion. But to your point, who goes floor to floor, room to room, right? One, they would have to know the house a little bit, I would think. And I've never been in the house, and, I've seen some 3D models. Still doesn't really help me. Like, well, what does that look like with the 3 stories? And why would the people on the first story not be harmed at all? Or how did they not hear it? Now, to be fair, I listen to music when I go to bed at night, so I probably wouldn't hear it as well. But there's just a lot of things. So you make a really good point there, angry, but very careful. Never thought of it like that. So got to be very meticulous, right? That's kind of a scary anger. That now that you put it that way, it's kind of a very scary anger. Somebody that just goes through. So, but I appreciate that comment, Alexander, and hopefully I didn't talk too fast. I know it's a lot of information that I just unpacked there that is just on my mind. Obviously I'll come live again, probably on Christmas or Christmas Eve, if there's any updates. We'll look at some other cases as well, because I think that there's some cases out there that I'm interested in. The Delphi murders is one of them that I'm really interested to see where that's going to go. And then the Shanquilla Robinson I've been following pretty closely, because that's a pretty scary case to me as well, where, friends just get out of hand. So we'll kind of hit some of those as well. But right now, the Idaho 4 is top of mind, especially for me in the near future, just because it's current events right now. And this case is really kind of just, like I said, I don't have a person that I think has done it or a suspect. And that's what kind of throws me off a bit. A lot of the times I'll kind of go through and I'll be like, yeah, that person's pretty suspicious, or maybe something didn't happen. Very much like Kylie Rodney. I thought like Kylie Rodney, I always thought that they were going to find her in the lake, just based off of what had happened. And that's where they ended up finding her, obviously. And this case, I just don't have something in mind where, what happened. So I appreciate that. Thank you for subscribing, Alexander. And again, I know I'm just ranting at this point, so I'm going to end it here. But I do appreciate everybody that checked in. I do have some videos. I typically go after missing and vanished folks that haven't been found. That's my videos on my YouTube channel. I will expand that as I get a little bit bigger, but for right now, I think that it's great for the community to bring some of the cold cases back. And maybe at some point we'll grow big enough to help solve a case at some point. I don't mean like going out and doing investigative work or anything, but just getting the information out there where it's shared and maybe somebody remembers something, I think would be pretty cool as we get bigger. So on that, I will leave you with this, folks. Have a great week, and I hope everybody has a great Christmas Eve, a great Christmas, and then hopefully everybody has the day off on Monday as well. I know if you're in retail like me, I do typically work a lot of holidays. This holiday I'm not working, so I'm pretty excited about that. But if there's anything that I can do to make my live stream better or my videos better. I always appreciate good feedback. You can leave it in comments. You can direct message me. My email's on my YouTube. Send me an email or say it in live chat. We've done a lot of work to try to get the voice better. I still got some work with sound and video, but as you can see, we painted the wall in the back. It's not that ugly yellow anymore. We'll continue to improve and grow with our community. So on that note, I'm going to end my stream here. I hope everybody has a wonderful night, and thank you for joining.